Order. Mr Tanji Desi to move the motion, please.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to serve under your chairship, Mr Rees. I am bringing forward this debate because of deep concerns about the future of the Department for International Development, about its funding and threats to our proud tradition as a distributor of aid to the most impoverished places on the planet. I am seeking cast-iron guarantees today that from the Minister that my fears are misplaced and that we will continue to make our full contribution of 0.7% of our national income to the world's poorest communities, that we will continue to address the deep scars of poverty and inequality that disfigure our world, the legacy of centuries of colonialism, of wars, of unequal and unjust distribution of the world's resources, that we will continue to consider ourselves as internationalists, brothers and sisters with the peoples of the world, not narrow isolationists cowering behind our drawbridge. The Department for International Development has a proud history, Mr Rees. As Right Honourable and Honourable members will know, it began as a separate ministry under Harold Wilson's Labour government in 1964. As a reflection, indeed, of Wilson's own internationalism and humanitarian beliefs, he appointed Barbara Castle as the first ever minister in charge of overseas aid. It then moved in and out of the Foreign Office, depending on who was in government. Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath put it under the FCO in 1970. Wilson once again returned its independence in 1974. Margaret Thatcher downgraded it to an agency again in 1979, and finally it became a full government department with a cabinet-level minister in 1997 under Tony Blair. It is to the credit of the coalition government elected in 2010 that this cycle of upgrading and downgrading was halted, with DFID remaining part of the machinery of government, and that its budget was maintained despite deep cuts to the rest of Whitehall. Perhaps, Mr Rees, also it shows how effective the work of DFID is and how established and respected it has become here and around the world. There have been some notable politicians at the helm. I mentioned the formidable Barbara Castle. No less formidable were Claire Short, Judith Hart, or the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central. And on the Conservative side, I should mention Chris Patten and Baroness Chalker. The first ever black woman to serve in a British cabinet was Baroness Amos, when she was appointed Secretary of State for International Development in 2003. DFID works in Afghanistan. Yes,
I'm sure he wasn't doing this at all deliberately, but he's also another great Secretary of State for International Development is actually taking part in the debate today, my right honourable friend for Sutton Coldfield, and he was in fact the one who ensured with the former Prime Minister David Cameron that DFID stayed under a Conservative-led government. As he rightly pointed out, it had been under Conservative governments before that it was downgraded, but this time it was not.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and indeed, since I was only at 2003, I was gradually coming on to the right honourable gentleman. But he makes a very, very valid point, and that is why, indeed, I congratulated the previous coalition government just now on their tremendous decision to keep that as a separate department. But DFID, Mr Rees, works in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Iraq, Malawi, Nepal, the occupied Palestinian territories, Sierra Leone, Syria, Tanzania, Yemen and Zimbabwe, to name just but a handful. It tackles gender inequality, helps to build health and education systems, and works with communities shattered by war, genocide or famine. DFID is respected and admired in all the places that it operates, whether that is in some of those places that are the hardest to reach by other organisations. Wherever the... yes, Sasha.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate. On listing some of the countries that he quite rightly draws attention to the good work that is being done by our 0.7% commitment, does he agree with me that we need to continue to be extremely vigilant in terms of a small number of those countries, particularly on the continent of Africa, where corruption is rife, and there are concerns from many people in the United Kingdom that some of that money, on occasions, is not going to those who can benefit most from it?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. Indeed, he makes a very, very valid point. We need to make sure that aid reaches those that most need it, and that it is not siphoned away by corrupt individuals in governments, whether they are in Africa or in other parts of the world. DFID, Mr. Rees, is respected and admired in all the places that it operates. Wherever the UK aid logo appears, it shows the world how much the British public care. Since the 2002 International Development Act, all overseas aid must be spent with the explicit purpose of reducing global poverty. This was an important piece of legislation because it made clear the distinction between aid and trade, that one is not the quid pro quo of the other. The Pagao Dam scandal showed that some aid in the 1980s and 1990s were being linked to trade deals. In this instance, Mr. Rees, despite clear objections from civil servants, there was a link between British aid in building the dam and the British arms sales to Malaysia.
You give way on that point.
Yes, I shall.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He mentions a very troubling incident, but he will also notice some echoes with today when there is again renewed calls that perhaps our aid budget should mirror trade interests. Does he still share with me that actually it's common global interest that matters, not narrow self-interest?
I thank my honourable friend, and he makes an excellent point. Indeed, I think he may be telepathic, because those are just some of the things that I'm about to mention just now within my speech. But I concur fully with his views. And indeed, that Pagao Dam scandal, Mr. Rees, was declared unlawful in the landmark court case in 1994. More recently, as my honourable friend has just said, fears have been raised that our aid budget has not been solely focused on poverty reduction. An article, indeed, in The Guardian revealed that charities such as Oxfam, Save the Children and ActionAid are deeply concerned that some of the funds are used by, and I quote, classing politically convenient projects as aid, rather than exclusively helping the most vulnerable in society. Of course, we must conduct this vital overseas aid because of our obligations as one of the wealthiest nations in the world. I'm sure the Minister today will offer warm, emollient words, and she will no doubt tell us the commitment of DFID as a department, and that the 0.7% target remains in place. At this point, Mr. Rees, I think it's very pertinent that we pay tribute to Michael Moore, the former Lib Dem MP, for bringing forward his private member's bill to enshrine the 0.7% target into law, and to the then government for allowing it to pass. We should welcome the Conservative Party's commitment in its 2017 manifesto, indeed, to maintain this 0.7% commitment, which I am sure the Minister will also mention in her speech. So why exactly should we be concerned about the future of DFID? We've seen the tectonic plates of politics shifting in recent months. The voices that considered overseas aid as a waste of money have become louder and more mainstream within the governing party. The critics are moving from the fringe to centre stage. The former Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Member for Witham, seemed more aligned with the Taxpayers' Alliance than the global anti-poverty movement. She resigned after running errands for the FCO in Israel rather than running her own department. Indeed, the former Foreign Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge, called the very establishment of DFID in 1997, as I quote, a colossal mistake. He has endorsed a report this month from the Henry Jackson Society, which calls for a dilution of DFID's role in alleviating poverty and a diversion towards broader international policies such as peacekeeping. He told the BBC's Today programme, and I quote once again, "We could make sure that 0.7% is spent more in line with Britain's political, commercial and diplomatic interests." Commercial interests, what could he possibly mean by that? My honourable friend, the member for Liverpool Walton, has made it very clear that he believes this is the opening act in a move to downgrade DFID and slash overseas aid. And it is very, very hard to disagree that this is the Secretary of State's secret agenda.
Will you give way?
Yes.
Does he not agree with me? It was telling, on that Today programme, no government minister was put up to defend their department or to shoot down these ideas. And to me, that says complicity with the idea itself.
I thank my honourable friend, and that is precisely why the likes of myself have applied for and secured this debate, because we are very, very concerned about the lack of leadership from government benches to actually say we do not agree with that. And that is indeed a point that I wish to further elaborate on very shortly. Mr. Rees, we are therefore rightly concerned that both UK Aid and the Department for Primary Responsibility for Spending It are under threat or will be diverted away from the alleviation of poverty and linked to trade. So can the Minister today go beyond the same old stock phrases, committing the government to the continuing existence of DFID and the 0.7% target, and give us a cast-iron guarantee that, one, she distances herself absolutely from the comments made by the former Foreign Secretary about the future of DFID, two, that any review of DFID's department policy post-Brexit will in no way undermine, downgrade, obfuscate or dilute the commitments enshrined in the International Development Act 2002 and the International Development Official Development Assistance Target Act 2015. And three, that her party will enter the next election with a manifesto commitment to maintain as a minimum the current levels of expenditure on overseas aid with the aim of eradicating poverty and tackling gender inequality. The Minister has an open goal. Let's see if she can settle this once and for all. Finally, Mr. Rees, I'm sure that we all stand united in our gratitude to the staff of DFID, whether they are freezing in the mountains of Tajikistan or sweltering in the heat of Mozambique, or in the offices at Abercrombie House, or just up the road at 22 Whitehall. We offer them our thanks. They are truly the best of British.